You must marry Ikenna from the village. It has been decided. The compound of Chief Ogore's estate in Enugu, Nigeria, witnessed the stretching of the morning sun. Birds sang from the branches of the mango trees that lined the property, and the smell of frying plantains wafted from the outdoor kitchen. Amid this peaceful scene, 24-year-old Amara stood frozen in her bedroom, her graduation gown still draped across her bed, the words of her father echoing in her ears. Her hands trembled as she clutched the framed photograph of herself in cap and gown, first-class honours in economics from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. A degree she had worked tirelessly for, staying up countless nights, pushing herself beyond exhaustion. A degree that was supposed to be her ticket to the consulting firm in Lagos that had already offered her a position. A degree that now meant nothing. "Biko, Papa, please," she had begged, falling to her knees before Chief Okori, a man whose large frame and thunderous voice commanded respect throughout eastern Nigeria. "I have plans. I have dreams." But the chief's face had remained impassive, his eyes not meeting hers. Beside him, her mother Anna looked at the floor, her usual vibrant demeanour subdued, her silence a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "You have been given everything," Chief Okori had said. "The best schools, the finest clothes. A life of privilege many can only dream of. Now it is time for you to fulfill your duty to this family." "By marrying a cassava farmer?" Amara had asked, rising to her feet, anger momentarily overshadowing her despair. "A man I've met once in my life?" "Kenna is the grandson of the man who saved my father's life during the war," the chief replied. "Our families have an understanding. This marriage will seal a bond of honour." "What about my honour, my choices?" It was then that her mother had finally spoken, her voice so soft Amara had to strain to hear it. "You must remember, Amara, you are not a daughter by birth, but by blessing. We chose you." The words had hit Amara like a physical blow. She had always known she was adopted. It was never a secret in their home, but it had never been wielded as a weapon against her. Until now. Now, as she stood in her bedroom, the full weight of her reality crashed upon her. She was property, an investment that needed to yield returns, a debt that required payment. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Her younger sister Chioma, the biological daughter, the true heir, entered without waiting for a response. At 20, Chioma was everything Amara was not. Carefree, outgoing and secure in her place in the family. She had their father's commanding presence and their mother's beauty. And unlike Amara, she was free to choose her own path. "They sent me to check on you," Chioma said, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "You left the dinner table so quickly." Amara turned away, not wanting her sister to see her tears. "What would you do, Chi, if they told you to marry a stranger, a poor man from the village with no education and no prospects?" Chioma sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the graduation gown with her hand. "I would fight," she said simply, "but then they would never ask this of me." The truth hung heavy in the air between them. "They say Ikenna is kind," Chioma offered, "and hard-working." "I don't want kind and hard-working. I want love. I want choice." Amara's voice broke. "I want the life I've worked for." Chioma stood and embraced her sister tightly. "Then we must find a way." But there was no way. The wedding preparations began immediately. Chief Okori, fearing his adopted daughter might flee, accelerated the traditional ceremonies. Within weeks, the date was set, the arrangements made, the village notified. Amara watched it all as if from a distance, going through the motions, her mind searching desperately for escape. But where would she go? How would she live? The job offer in Lagos required her father's blessing. No respectable company would hire a daughter who had rebelled against her family. And in Nigeria, family was everything. The night before she was to leave for the village, Amara sat on the balcony of her bedroom, looking out at the lights of Enugu city in the distance. Chioma joined her, placing a small package in her hands. "I saved from my allowance," she whispered. "It's not much, but it might help, if you decide to run." Amara opened the package to find a stack of Naira notes and a small gold bracelet. "I can't take this," she protested. "You can, and you will," Chioma insisted. "You are my sister, no matter what they say." Tears streamed down Amara's face as she clutched the money. "But where would I go?" Chioma's eyes gleamed in the darkness. "I have a friend in Lagos. She would help you, at least until you find your feet." For a moment, hope flickered in Amara's heart. Then she thought of the shame it would bring on the family, the pain it would cause her mother, who, despite her complicity in this arrangement, had always shown her love. And, deeper still, the fear of the unknown, of being truly alone in a world that had little mercy for women without protection. "I can't," she finally said, handing the package back to Chioma. "This is my fate. I must accept it." Chioma reluctantly took the money but pressed the bracelet into Amara's palm. "Then take this as a reminder that you are loved, that you are Amara Akuri, first-class economics graduate, and no one can take that from you." The following morning, Amara was driven to Umuaka village, 3 hours from the city. As the family's sleek SUV navigated the increasingly rough roads, the landscape changed from urban sprawl to lush countryside, dotted with small farms and modest compounds. They arrived at the home of Ikena's family, a collection of simple buildings with zinc roofs and walls in need of fresh paint. Children played in the red dirt yard. Women pounded fufu in large wooden mortars, and old men sat in the shade of a massive iroko tree. It was a world away from everything Amara knew. Ikena himself came forward to greet them. He was taller than Amara remembered from their brief meeting months ago, with broad shoulders and hands roughened by labour. His eyes met hers briefly before lowering in respect. "Welcome to our home," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "We are honoured by your presence." Chief Okori emerged from the car, instantly commanding attention. The village elders came forward, and soon Amara was forgotten as the men retreated to discuss the final arrangements. A group of women led Amara to a small room that had been prepared for her. The walls were freshly painted, the bed covered with a colourful handmade quilt, and a vase of wildflowers sat on a wooden table, small touches that spoke of care and effort. "Ikena prepared this room himself," one of the women said proudly. "He wanted you to feel welcome." Amara said nothing. No amount of fresh paint could disguise the reality of what her life would be here, fetching water from the communal well, cooking over an open fire, washing clothes by hand, and bearing children who would inherit this same life of hardship. The wedding ceremony took place 2 days later, a blend of traditional rites and Christian blessings. Amara wore the white dress her mother had chosen, spoke the words that were expected of her, and accepted the blessings of elders whose names she struggled to remember. Through it all, she felt nothing. Not when the village women ululated in celebration. Not when her father handed her over with a speech about duty and honour. Not even when Ikena placed a ring on her finger, his hands trembling slightly as they touched hers. That night, as she sat on the edge of the bed in what was now her marital home, Amara finally allowed herself to weep not the quiet tears she had shed in private over the past weeks, but deep, racking sobs that came from a place of absolute despair. She didn't hear the door open, didn't realize Ikenna had entered until he spoke. "I know you don't want to be here," he said, his voice low. "I know you don't want me." Amara looked up, suddenly conscious of her tear-stained face, of her vulnerability before this stranger who was now her husband. To her surprise, Ikenna made no move toward her. Instead, he placed a folded blanket on the floor at the foot of the bed. "I will sleep here," he said simply, until you decide otherwise." Before she could respond, he added, "I am sorry they forced you into this. If I had known." He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "We are married now, but I will not force anything else upon you." With that, he lay down on the blanket, turning his back to her, leaving Amara to stare at him in confusion. This was not what she had expected. Not from a village man, not from someone she had been told needed a wife to cook and clean and bear children. The days that followed fell into a routine. Amara rose early, joining the other women for the morning chores. She learned to fetch water without spilling most of it, to build a cooking fire that didn't smoke too much, to prepare dishes that were unfamiliar to her city-trained hands. The women watched her with a mixture of curiosity and amusement, the chief's daughter with her soft hands and university education, struggling with tasks they had mastered as children. Some offered guidance, others whispered behind their hands, taking satisfaction in her difficulties. Through it all, Ikenna remained a respectful distance. Each night he slept on his blanket on the floor. Each day he worked his cassava farm, returning tired and dirty, but always taking time to ask about her day, to thank her for the meals she prepared, to tell her something about the village or his family. As weeks turned to months, Amara found herself settling into a numb acceptance. This was her life now. The dreams of corporate offices and economic analysis faded like photographs left too long in the sun. Until the day Ikenna came home with a package. "For you," he said, handing her the brown paper parcel with an almost shy smile. Inside, Amara found books, economics journals, the latest publications from Nigerian financial analysts, and a handwritten note from her former professor at UN. "How did you get these?" she asked, running her fingers over the glossy covers in disbelief. "I went to the university," Ikenna replied. "I asked your professor what you might like to read. He remembered you. Said you were his brightest student." Something stirred in Amara's chest, a feeling so foreign after months of emotional numbness that she hardly recognized it as hope. "But why?" she asked. Ikenna sat beside her, careful to maintain the space between them that had become their unspoken boundary. "Because you are more than just my wife," he said. "You are Amara, the economist, the scholar. I don't want you to lose that part of yourself." His words unlocked something in her. That night, Amara stayed up reading until the kerosene lamp burned low, devouring information about Nigeria's changing economic landscape, the growth sectors, the challenges of policy implementation, all the things that had once consumed her interest. In the morning, she found Ikenna already at work behind their small house, repairing a broken fence. "Why do you sleep on the floor?" she asked without preamble. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Because I want you to choose me," he said simply. "Not be forced to accept me. I was told you needed a wife. That this marriage was important to you and your family." Ikenna's laugh held no humor. "Is that what they said? My grandfather and your father arranged this marriage when we were children. I had no more choice than you did." Amara stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "Then why did you agree?" He was silent for a long moment. "Because I saw you once, years ago, when you came to the village with your family for the harvest festival. You were reading a book while everyone else was dancing. I wondered what could be so interesting." His eyes met hers. "I never imagined I would be the prison you were sentenced to." The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Amara. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Nor you," he replied with the hint of a smile. "I thought the chief's daughter would be soft and helpless. But you learn quickly. You work hard. You've earned the respect of even old Mother Adana, and she respects no one." For the first time since arriving in the village, Amara found herself really smiling. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Amara asked about the cassava farm, how it operated, the challenges of getting fair prices for the harvest. Ikenna spoke openly about his struggles with middlemen who exploited farmers, about his dreams of expanding to other crops, about the cooperative he had tried to form with neighbouring farmers. "The problem is capital," he explained, "and knowledge. We know how to farm, but not how to navigate markets, how to maximise profits." Amara found herself outlining possible solutions, drawing on her economics training, sketching ideas in the margins of her notebooks. Ikenna listened intently, asking questions that revealed unexpected depth of understanding. "You're wasted as a cassava farmer," she said without thinking. Instead of taking offence, Ikenna laughed. "Perhaps, but then you are wasted as a village wife." That night, as Ikenna prepared his blanket on the floor, Amara made a decision. "The bed is big enough for both of us," she said quietly, "as long as you stay on your side." The look of surprise and cautious happiness on his face remained with her as she fell asleep, conscious of his presence beside her, yet feeling, strangely, safer than she had in months. The turning point came during the rainy season, when the roads to the village became nearly impassable and the cassava fields threatened to flood. Amara found Ikenna outside in the downpour, digging channels to divert water from the precious crops. Without a word, she grabbed a shovel and joined him, ignoring the mud that soaked her clothes and the rain that plastered her hair to her face. They worked side by side for hours, saving most of the crop. Later, exhausted and chilled, they huddled by the fire I had built in their small home. "Why did you help me?" Ikenna asked, passing her a cup of hot tea. "Because it matters to you," she replied, "and because I'm starting to understand that this farm isn't just about cassava. It's about possibility." That night, Amara did not turn away when Ikenna reached for her hand across the space that had separated them in the bed. And when he kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded, she didn't think about the life she had lost, but about the one she might be finding. The seasons changed, and with them, Amara's perception of her life in Umuaka village. What had once seemed like punishment began to reveal unexpected opportunities. Using her economics training, she helped Ikenna reorganize the farm's operations, cutting out exploitative middlemen and forming direct relationships with buyers in Enugu and even Lagos. She started teaching basic financial literacy to the women in the village, showing them how to save, how to invest in their small businesses selling palm oil or hand-woven cloth. The same women who had once mocked her city ways now sought her advice, respected her knowledge. And Ikenna, the poor village farmer she had been forced to marry, revealed himself to be a man of surprising depth and vision. He had taught himself to read English by lamplight after long days in the fields. He understood agriculture not just as tradition but as science. And most surprisingly to Amara, he valued her mind as much as her presence in his home. "I've been thinking," she said one evening as they sat on the small veranda of their expanded home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "What if we started a proper cooperative? Not just for selling crops, but for processing them." Ikenna looked at her, his interest piqued. "Processing? Cassava into gari, into flour, into export quality products," she explained, excitement building in her voice. "Value addition. It's what separates struggling farmers from agribusiness. That would require investment, equipment, training." "I know," Amara said, reaching for his hand, "but I've been running the numbers, with what we've saved, and if we could get a small loan." Ikenna studied her face in the fading light. You would want to stay here, to build something here? You could still go back to the city, to the life you trained for. The question gave her pause. When had the village become home? When had this man become not just her husband by arrangement, but her partner by choice? The life I trained for was using economics to solve problems, she said slowly. What bigger problem is there than rural poverty, than the exploitation of farmers who feed the nation? The pride and love that bloomed on Ikenna's face was answer enough. Their cooperative began small, just 5 farmers pooling resources to buy a cassava processing machine. Amara handled the business side, negotiating better prices, keeping meticulous records, reinvesting profits. Ikenna managed the agricultural aspects, introducing new farming techniques, experimenting with varieties that yielded more starch. Word spread. Other villages took notice. A year into their venture, a representative from an international development agency visited, impressed by what they had accomplished with so little. We would like to feature your cooperative in our report, the woman said, taking photographs of the small processing facility they had built, and possibly provide funding for expansion. That evening, as they celebrated with palm wine and Ikenna's favourite igisi soup, a car appeared on the village road, the unmistakable black Sav of Chief Okori. Amara felt her stomach clench with anxiety. She had maintained minimal contact with her family since the wedding, sending respectful but distant messages through the occasional visitor who travelled between the village and Imug. Her father had not come to see how she fared, had not inquired beyond formal courtesy about her welfare. The chief emerged from the vehicle, as commanding as ever, but Amara noticed something new in his bearing, a slight stoop to his shoulders, a hesitancy that had never been there before. Father, she greeted him, the traditional gesture of respect automatic despite everything. Amara, he replied, his eyes taking in her appearance, the simple but clean wrapper and blouse she wore, the healthy glow of her skin, the quiet confidence in her stance. You look well? I am well, she said, neither warmth nor coldness in her tone. Chief Okori turned to Ikenna, who had come to stand beside his wife. And you, Ikenna, I hear interesting reports about this village, about changes. Ikenna inclined his head respectfully, but did not lower his eyes. We have been blessed with some success, Chief Okori. Success that has reached the ears of government ministers, the chief said, a note of surprise evident. They speak of an agricultural revolution starting in a small village, of a model that could be replicated. Amara exchanged a glance with Ikenna, both caught off guard by this information. Will you not invite your father into your home? The chief asked, a hint of his old authority returning. The home that had once seemed hopelessly inadequate to Amara now appeared through her father's eyes, the expanded rooms, the small solar panel that powered lights and charged phones, the bookshelves Ikenna had built to hold her growing collection of economic texts, the certificate of recognition from the Ministry of Agriculture hanging prominently on the wall. The chief sat at their table, accepting the kola nut and palm wine that tradition demanded be offered to an honoured guest. His eyes moved constantly, taking in details, reassessing. Your mother wishes to visit, he said finally, and your sister. They miss you. They are welcome, Amara replied, surprised to find she meant it. And you, Amara? Do you not miss the comforts of the city? The opportunities? She looked at Ikenna before answering, drawing strength from his steady presence. I have found different opportunities here, father. Important ones. The chief nodded slowly. So I see. He hesitated, then added, the bank I chair is looking to expand its agricultural loan program to support ventures like yours. Perhaps you would consider consulting on the project. Amara blinked in surprise. You want my professional opinion? I want my daughter's expertise, he corrected. The same daughter who graduated with honours, and who has now created something remarkable in a place where most saw only poverty. Something shifted in Amara's heart, not forgiveness, not yet, but a crack in the wall of resentment she had built. After the chief departed, with promises of return visits and potential business partnerships, Amara and Ikenna stood in the doorway of their home, watching the Sov disappear down the village road. "He still sees me as an investment," Amara said softly. "Only now it's paying dividends he didn't expect." Ikenna wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "And what do you see when you look at your life now?" Amara turned in his embrace, facing the man she had been forced to marry, the man she had chosen to love. "I see that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us exactly where we need to be," she said. "I see that poor is a condition that can change, but kind and visionary are character traits that remain." She looked past him to the village that had become her home, to the women heading to the cooperative meeting she would lead tomorrow, to the future they were building together, not the one that had been planned for her, but one she had helped create. "They forced me to marry a poor man because I was adopted," she said, echoing the words that had defined her despair 2 years earlier. "And then this happened. We happened." Ikenna's smile held all the pride and love and partnership that had grown between them. "No," he corrected gently. "You happened, Amara. You came here, and instead of breaking, you built. That's the story they will tell." And as the sun set over their village, Amara knew it was a story she was proud to claim as her own. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me what you think about Amara parents. Why would anyone simply to repay kindness? When did girls become objects? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Kindly subscribe, turn on your notification bell to be the first to know when another amazing story is made available. Like and share, so others will see this story and learn this lesson. Till the next story lovers, enjoy your day. Bye!